Chapter 30. You really should consider having that boarding pod removed, and patching the hull, Syntholo said as the rounded door to the pod closed behind him. I don't mind leaving it there, like a barnacle on the outer hull. If things ever got really bad, it could come in handy. It's like an escape pod with a rudimentary navigation system. I'd hate to have to navigate using a targeting system, Syntholo quipped as they walked through the cargo bay. Callie stroked the top of her communicator. Tyrell, we're coming up. Tell Jake to meet us on the bridge. Syntholo started making his way to the elevator. Callie smiled at the distinctive sound of the twins' feet thumping on the metal deck plating. The faint scratching noise of their clawed toes differed slightly in pitch. No ambush games, Yari, she said as she looked toward the nose of the new shuttle. She launched herself backward as he stepped out of his hiding spot to apologize. She collided with Ziku as he tried to jump out from the other side, hoping to catch her unaware. Callie patted the top of his scaly black head. Did you get that water taken care of? I caught Mama, Ziku said proudly, as he wrapped his massive furry arms around her. Yari lowered his head slightly as his upper body rotated forward and back. Don't worry, Yari, Callie said with a broad smile. I'm going to give you a hug, too. Your brother was just closer. Thank you, Ziku. I really needed a big, extra warm and fluffy hug. Ziku let go of her after giving her an extra squeeze. I am getting good with water. Can you teach air next? Only if you promise not to use it to make it sound like people are farting, Callie said as she rushed over to hug Yari. Syntholo chuckled softly. He just shook his head, didn't he? Callie said without turning to look. Yari laughed as she hugged him and heard a loud farting noise. She let go and looked at him with disappointment. That's what I get for teaching you sound imitation. But Mama, they said in unison. Stop, Callie said forcefully and directed them to both stand next to each other in front of the shuttle. I can't read your body language when you're standing that far apart. She stood, just in front of Syntholo, watching the twins' movements as they pled their case. Yari had been trying to mimic different sounds using their newly learned Kobe-Tomj ability, and Ziku wanted to learn how you move the air so they could make it sound like the noises his brother was making were coming from somewhere else. That could be useful for more than just pranks. Callie considered, as her tails moved around her instinctively. I don't think air-based abilities would be best for relocating sounds. Try sonic abilities, Syntholo said softly. The twins seemed confused. Sound requires a medium like air to move though, but it can also move through other things like water, Callie explained. Sound moves like waves, so we call the more advanced ability shock waves. Shock sounds like electricity, but because it's sound, we categorize those powers as sonic so it's less confusing. The problem with jumping right into sonic types, Syntholo said loud enough to ensure the twins would hear his discussion with Callie, is that it requires a better understanding of the iteration of particles in the air and that's classified as Earth-based. You're just going to confuse them more, Callie objected. We use Earth to describe both particles like dust as well as the solid state of matter. Slow water particles and they get colder and become ice. Cold is good, Ziku said, as Yuri insisted, ice is better. I know, Callie said, the kids benefit, and if you speed up the water particles, they get warmer and you get steam. Steam is like air that you can see, Yari said while looking at their brother. After a pause, Ziku said, when I work water faster I make steam. That is a kind of air. The water particles are like other particles in the air. Syntholo seemed a little impressed by how quickly they were picking up the concept. Is smell a particle? Yari asked. Callie flashed Syntholo a sidelong glance to prevent him from giving an answer that could undo all the progress they'd made. Those little specks of dusts floating in a ray of light. It's like that. Zika's grin had become so broad it was almost menacing. Okay, Mama. I will teach myself air and make you proud. Callie sauntered over to them and scratched each of them under the chin. I'm already proud of both my sons. Syntholo waited patiently by the elevator. Dr. Jake is going to need your help later, Callie said. The bug wants to steal from us, Zika growled. Our blood, Yari added. Callie took a step back so she could see their body language. If something happens, and you get a cut and lose blood, we need a way to replace what you lost. Our blood is different, colder. We have no way to give you more. If you give us some to store, it will help keep you safe. Your bodies will make more to replace what he takes. They both rotated their hands slowly, with their arms hanging low. They weren't happy about it, but they understood the importance. Callie strode over to the elevator. It opened as she drew near. Syntholo smirked and followed her into the rounded chamber. Tyrell likes opening doors for me, Callie shrugged as the elevator sped into action. What were you two up to? Tyrell asked over the intercom. I wasn't able to reach either of you for almost an hour. Anything important happen? Syntholo asked. Nothing major, Tyrell said as the elevator door opened. Jake lowered his head in greeting as he stepped onto the elevator. I talked to the twins, Callie said. I think they understand the importance of giving blood now. Thank you, Lady Darkseid, Jake said through his translator. The elevator slowed to a stop. Are you sure about this? Syntholo whispered. Callie sighed and nodded as the door opened. Syntholo walked over and sat down at a console on the right side of the bridge, as she instructed Jake to have a seat on the left. The Loctarian seemed nervous. We've been talking, and we need to discuss some things, Callie said. Tyrell, I gather Jake already talked to you about what he needs for my sons. We have no idea who else we may come across over the course of our journey. Can we afford to purchase a full comprehensive database covering all of the known species? Jake seemed startled. We already have the basic package. I'll look into it, Tyrell said. Some have to be purchased individually. More information on the avian species, Jake said. Her biology is not hard. Nervous system data is helpful. I have been having a hard time with that one, Tyrell said. They're not a common species, Syntholo said. There used to be a colony of Sirvani near Dominion Space and another near the Esh-Ealer system. You may need to start there. I'll check into it, Tyrell assured them. Callie sat down at her usual terminal. I want you to get copies of my records from my last trip to the hospital, and make them available for Jake. A consent form was displayed on her console. She signed it without a second thought. Thank you, Lady Darkseid, Jake said, as all four of his shoulders raised and his head lowered. I look front to view it again. The translation was adequate. Callie turned to Syntholo. Do you have it yet? Sending it over now, he said as he sent a file over to Jake's terminal. Tyrell, you may want to. What the fuck is? Tyrell said in horror. I tried to warn you, Syntholo snickered. Jake, Callie said, what you're looking at is a specialized form of birth control made specifically for Class 3 male reproductive systems. Can you install one? I've included the surgical notations along with the device schematics, said while looking back and forth between Tyrell and Jake. Who is this for? Tyrell said in disgust. Calm down, Syntholo laughed heartily, it's not for you. Who in their right mind would agree to have something like that bolted to their vas deferens? Is that a switch on the back? Me. I've had one for over 30 years, Syntholo snarled. It prevents insemination by destroying the semen as it passes through the bands. The switch deactivates the device, and it can't be flipped by mistake. You really have one of these hanging from your... Tyrell said in alarm. It looks heavy. He'll get used to it. I did. I feel bad for the kid already, Tyrell scowled. We'll see how you feel when we've finished our little chat, Syntholo grumbled. Easy procedure, Jake said. Provide device. I will do. That's great, Callie said. That's all we needed for now. We'll let you know if and when we're ready to proceed. They waited for Jake to leave before moving on to the next part of their discussion. Okay, you too, Tyrell said as his eyes darted back and forth. You know damn right well that pod isn't connected to the ship systems. 40 minutes playing in the tub, then about an hour in there while I'm stuck running interference. I don't care who, but one of you is telling me what's going on. Callie lowered her head and stared at the floor. You already know about the programming, let me fill in the gaps, Syntholo explained. When she was cloned, she was made to be obedient to that brother they molded, Shinji's personality after. She's having a problem separating the two of them in her head. Sounds messy, Tyrell whistled softly, but I don't see. To make matters worse, Syntholo continued, he's been using an ability called empathic projection on her since they first met. She's been acting on his feelings and has no clue how she feels or what she wants. I don't want to just mind wipe him and have him reprogrammed, Callie said through bared teeth. I know people that can do it, and I'd be no better than the people at PRI. Just relax, Syntholo consoled. I've got this. Tyrell listened with mild irritation. With all the conditioning, Syntholo explained, there is no way for either of them to know if any of their feelings are real. I only had 2 questions, Tyrell quipped, and that didn't answer either. Callie looked up in confusion. What questions? Why do you two look like you're dressed for a toga party? Tyrell mocked. My armor is made of 5 layers of Q-cloth, Syntholo chuckled. We headed straight to the dock after the bath, so she's wearing 2 layers of my armor. What was the other question? Tyrell glanced down at his console. What's with the nut buster? Callie giggled. That's not what it's called, Syntholo sneered. You see that, Tyrell said while motioning at Callie. That's called a smile, and right now that's all that matters to me. So, what's the plan? Shinji insists he loves her, Syntholo said slyly. We're going to give him a chance to prove he can overcome his programming. It will take him a few weeks to fully recover from the surgery. The more he lets his prick do the thinking for him, the more miserable he's going to be. It's like putting a training collar on a pet. It may not be the kindest solution, but it will give him a chance to prove that his feelings run deeper than lust. Giving him an ultimatum is a bad idea, Tyrell insisted. I won't be, Callie said firmly. We have it all planned out. He's going to demand to go through the procedure. What makes you so sure this plan will work? Tyrell inquired skeptically. I know my brother, Kayla grinned as her personality took the dominant position. They did mold his personality after him. And if you're wrong, Tyrell snickered. Rinse and repeat, Syntholo chuckled dryly. Are you sure this will do it for you? Tyrell asked her. No, it won't, Kayla admitted. I'm just as frustrated as I was earlier, but after what happened I don't even want him touching me while he's proving he's more than just a wandering penis. This will give me a chance to separate him from my brother in my head. There have been times he's been sweet and intuitive. I need to know I'm making my own decision. I might actually like him, but I need him to stop flooding me with his emotions first. Just tell me what you need me to do, Tyrell said. I don't suppose you know how to act, Syntholo grinned. Not real acting, Tyrell snickered, but being a private investigator isn't far from being a salesman or confidence man. Where is he now? Kayla asked. Tyrell glanced from side to side and then said, someone forgot to close a door. He's been in your room for a while. I couldn't close it while carrying you, Syntholo said apologetically. I could have done it, but I didn't think of it either, Kayla blushed. I could call him to the bridge, Tyrell offered. Can you connect to the hardware in his head from here? I can't access it through auxiliary systems. That's a no, Syntholo whispered loudly. Tyrell shrugged. For a piece of equipment, like that, the closer the better. I'd put it around 25 feet, give or take. Good to know, Kayla said. Sin, are you ready? It's a bit bright in here, Syntholo smiled. Can we switch to evening mode? That's going to mess with everyone's circadian rhythm, Tyrell complained. I'll just ease it down 20% over the next few minutes. Will that suffice? Can you do 30? Mood lighting activation starting now, Tyrell chuckled dryly. Monitor my room, Kayla sighed as she started walking toward the elevator. Sin. On the way, Syntholo said as he rushed over to meet her in the elevator. Kayla smiled deviously as the door closed. Tyrell, move the elevator midway between the main deck and bridge, halt the elevator, and wait for further instructions. I appreciate your discretion, Syntholo said softly. It can be difficult to maintain trust with people once they find out about my knack and what I'm capable of. You could have made a great spy. I'd still prefer if you would shapeshift before we do this. Still no, Syntholo smirked. Please. Stop pushing, or I'm backing out. Backing out? You're not inside of me yet. If you keep talking like that, I may have to reconsider. Okay, fine, Kayla muttered. I just feel more comfortable if. Fine, Syntholo grumbled, turn around. I want to watch, Kayla pouted as she reluctantly turned to face the wall. The shadows cast within the dim lighting spread and darkened. Kayla narrowed her eyes and waited for them to adjust as a smoky black cloud flowed out from Syntholo, flooding the elevator. They discussed this while they were locked in the boarding pod, and she'd seen it in action while he was in the security cell on Hyrule. The electricity that had flickered around him was innate to the creature he'd bonded with and was only available when in his bestial form, but the dark miasma was generated by his knack. Tiny purple specks glimmered within the darkness, visible only to her Eldarani eyes. His knack was an extremely rare, poorly understood, and often maligned power called Dark Force. Just as psionics had its counterpart in cyberpathy, Dark Force's counterpart is called lore. The development of new abilities had always been like an arms race. Each time a new ability was developed, practitioners of the other mystic arts would work on replicating or countering the new power. The basis for all knack-based healing abilities was derived from lore. It was regarded as the creation half of the paradigm. Both talents were beyond her capability, but she could simulate some of the less complex abilities of each. I can only guarantee an hour, Syntholo's voice whispered all around her, as his shadow was drawn swiftly into her own. Don't take too long. What's going on in there? Tyrell's voice said over the intercom. Syntholo just vanished from ship sensors entirely. Tyrell, just bring us down, Kayla laughed. Just because you can't see him, doesn't mean he's not here. Everything is going to plan. Kayla smiled as she watched her shadow moving with her and stepped off the elevator. The shadow made it look like her tails were fluffy, her hands clawed. It was dark, too dark, but looked more and more natural as the ship lighting continued to dim. Sometimes her eyes would refocus in her sleep. Being woken up by the blinding light of energy flowing through the power conduits behind the walls was excruciating, so she kept her quarters on low power mode. Callie paused as she reached the door to her room. It was open. She could feel Shinji's mind. He was playing with the amplifier. Both of the consciousnesses within her could feel it. She wasn't drunk, and he wasn't on ambrosia, so he wasn't a threat to her in the least. The bed was the centerpiece of the room. It had 4 thick posts anchored to the ceiling, with metallic loops positioned at strategic heights, and a compartment built into the headboard. Shinji had apparently relocated the bottle of alcohol and glasses from his room onto the small square table on the left side of the room. Both of the chairs had been pulled away from the table. The button-down shirt she'd cast off earlier was hung over the chair closest to the door. The remnants of the plaid skirt had been laid on the corner of her large desk against the back wall. Shinji had certainly made himself at home in her room. Your boyfriend is an idiot, Kivaza thought to her other self. Not cute, Kayla retorted. Fine, he's cute, Kivaza admitted. The shape of her shadow quivered slightly. Syntholo had told her dark force could emulate soul touch while he was in her shadow. He said it would allow him to see and hear everything she did, but she didn't expect it to allow him to hear her thoughts. She didn't like being laughed at, but it was comforting knowing she wasn't alone. Her two selves merged effortlessly as Callie strode into the room. On the right side of the room there was a closed curtain concealing the clear wall-length display case containing the possessions Thalu had once prized most. The ambient lighting in the room was being generated by holographic candles positioned in each corner. Shinji had opened the curtain and was looking at the strange collection of relics on the other side of the clear wall. The interior of the vault could be seen beyond a second pane of transparent plasteel. It's like a trophy case. What are they? Shinji asked. Not mine, Callie chucked mirthlessly as she stepped over the red knee socks which were still laying on the floor. I'm not sure what most of it is, honestly. That's Thalu's vault. Well, what you can see of it from here. I haven't made any major changes to the ship yet. Callie cautiously headed over to join him by the curtain. Is any of this yours? He asked. Technically, Callie chucked softly, everything in there is my property, but the only thing I added is that fist-sized silver sphere over there. What is it? Callie grinned. Remember my conversation with that shoe seller? The Lunarian who wanted to be a Terran? Shinji nodded. That little ball in there is what we were talking about. That is a changeling mutation core. I, kind of overdosed on ambrosia, had a really weird night, and woke up lying next to a half-eaten mutation core. You hear plenty of stories about people having an interesting night and waking up to a surprise, but three tails and skin pigmentation isn't how those stories usually end. So, if I ate that thing? No, Callie said firmly, but it may be a way to help Gaori get her wings back. I don't know how they're supposed to be used. I got lucky. Callie's shadow shifted momentarily, independent of her movements. Nobody's touching that thing until I know it's safe, she said as her black tail thumped the shadow being cast near the glass. I had two, but that's the only one left. The one I consumed was a little charred. Her shadow retreated to a more natural position. A tiny little thing like that changed you so much? Callie blushed, acutely aware that Syntholo could hear everything she was saying. There were other changes too. You've probably noticed a few. Like what? She felt Shinji's attempt to read her surface thoughts bounce off her mental defenses. If he tried that again, she was going to make it hurt. I was almost indistinguishable from any normal sub-Terran before I did that. Callie stroked the top of her communicator, without activating it. Tyrell, you there? Tyrell answered over the room intercom. I'm here. What do you need? Can you access student admission records for the Teijeru Academy? Easy enough, Tyrell snickered. What are you after? Do they have an image on file for Kayla Visala, the daughter of Valkyr Visala and Flare Goran? I'm seeing two sets of records here. Are you looking for the most recent? Tyrell asked. Please, Callie said. Can you display the photo on file in my room? Who? Shinji asked softly. Me, Callie said shyly. Back when I was 17, a few years before my transformation. Is that so? Tyrell said over the room intercom. Now you've piqued my curiosity. Hey kid, do they photograph arrivals when they send them to decontamination? These school photos are pretty bad. Twice, Shinji said. Once when they enter the booth and a second picture when they leave. A console to the left of the curtain lit up displaying all 3 images. Well, that explains a lot, Tyrell jeered. You were a natural redhead. No wonder you're trouble. A lot darker complected than most. That's enough of that, Callie said scornfully. The intercom beeped as he deactivated the speaker. I'm trying to decide if you were cute or hot, Shinji teased. How old did you say you were when this picture was taken? 17, Callie said with a shrug. She felt a faint tugging sensation as her shadow shifted on the floor, pantomiming strangling him. She ignored the sensation to ensure nobody would notice. That's legal on Hyrule, Shinji grinned. So hot, not just cute. Callie smirked. Shinji closed the curtain. So, your secondary stripes. The light brown ones. That was your original skin color? I'm not sure if it's exact, but yeah, close enough. He kept looking back and forth between her and the image on the screen. You got shorter, he noted as he looked at her old school intake record, skinnier, heavier, and, smaller? Callie smirked. My bone and muscle density increased. It had to come from somewhere. My muscles are more compact now. I got a couple inches shorter, and yes, my breasts are smaller. I dropped from a D to a B cup, but I have a narrower rib cage now, so it looks like a C if you don't know any better. So, you used to, Shinji completed the rest of the thought in his head, but not aloud. Yes, Shinji, Callie smirked. I used to have normal breasts with nipples. She could feel a tingle at the base of her spine where the shadows cast by Syntholo's tails overlapped her own. This was an unexpected side effect of Sin using his shadow form ability and blending into her shadow. He'd noticed it as well, and mimicked her movements more closely. They're not as soft as normal ones, Shinji said defensively, but they still feel nice. I'm so glad they meet with your approval, Callie rolled her eyes. Just wait until he finds out we can kill him with our clitoris, Kivaza mocked from the back of their mind, as her black tail stirred restlessly. The movement of her body and her shadow fell out of sync momentarily. That comment had caught Syntholo off guard. Shinji was intently studying the image on the screen and hadn't noticed. Your face didn't change, other than the stripes by your cheekbones, he commented. Shinji smiled flirtatiously as he slowly approached her. I think it's fair to say you're not like other girls. It's just going to take me a little while to getting used to just how different. He glanced down at her feet in confusion. Callie's knees were just slightly bent, with her heels hovering just above the floor. It was a Silkata combat stance with a more balanced center of gravity. Each heel would only touch the ground when bracing or pivoting. She wasn't entirely sure if this was how she always walked while both of her halves were working together or if she was instinctively matching Syntholo's natural movements. Silkata was an unarmed variant of the Silkandi combat dance style, which had been first developed for Sam Saran Imperial Guards in the Esh-Ealer home system. Sin's movements, even in Terran form, couldn't hide the decades of training he must have undergone. One day she hoped the two of them could dance together. Shinji held out his hand to her. Callie bit her lower lip. She looked down at his hand and smiled weakly, as she struggled against her desire to hit him. She was doing her best to act like nothing was wrong, but it was getting harder every time he opened his mouth. Waves of calming emotion were emanating from him, but she refused to be pacified. I'm having a hard time reading you tonight, Shinji said nervously. What's wrong? After what happened earlier, Callie looked around the room as she spoke. You thought you'd just make yourself at home in my room. You rearranged the clothing that traumatized me, took back the amp, brought in and arranged the bottle and glasses on my table. What did you think was going to happen here? I thought we could talk about what happened. I accept my part in what happened. If I knew that memory existed, would never have picked out that outfit. Once I realized what was happening, I tried pulling out of the memory. You took your time. It wasn't until my brother tried shoving his fingers between my legs and Kivaza snapped his wrist that you finally pulled away from the memory. You lack discipline. That stupid little band around your head can make you stronger, but not better. You thought we could talk. Then why did you seem to think the only way to entertain each other during the trip was in bed? After what happened earlier, I was hoping you'd let me make it up to you. Shinji said slyly. Would you like me to leave my vagina here with you while I go do something productive? The Kivaza half of her soul thought loudly enough to be overheard. Syntholo laughed from within her shadow so hard it made her tails twitch. I planned on spending time training you so you could actually be helpful. What did you have in mind? Shinji asked nervously. I want to show you who I really am, on the inside, but I'm having second thoughts. Kayla tried to sound playful, but it came out condescending. I just don't think you're ready. What do you mean? Kayla led him over to the bed, sat down, and motioned for him to sit next to her. He sat down and tried leaning in to kiss her, but she leaned away. I thought you wanted to, Shinji began. That's not at all what I meant by showing you who I am inside. Kayla smirked as she felt Kivaza's psyche lurking closer to the surface of her mind. I am sorry, Shinji said sadly. I fell for you the moment I met you, and I fell hard. I want to know you more. I don't want just that. I want what you have with that lamentic. Well, trust and understanding. Isn't that what relationships are about? Taking the time to get to know one another? You're more than just a collection of memories or a jumble of conflicting emotions. That's the you I want to know. Not just half of you, all of you. I get it. I screwed up. Please, give me a chance to make this right. Her black tail coiled around his wrist and forearm. Grab my tail and hold on tight. If we do this, there isn't any turning back. It's like a roller coaster. The ride won't stop until you reach the end. He gripped her tail firmly. Cyan's soul touch was innate. It was a much more difficult process with Syntholo acting as a conduit through which to draw Shinji into her mindscape. Callie had to draw him through Syntholo's shadow, like trying to feed a thread through the eye of a needle.